Here, I'll start our recording equipment. And so welcome back, Pastor Phelps. And we're just doing another weekly update with Pastor Phelps here and kind of touch base about current events and things that are going on in the world. So welcome, Pastor Phelps.
Good to be with you, Sean, and your listeners.
Yep. And so I just wanted to get time to talk with you. It's been a few months, I think, since we talked, and America's been going through a lot of different gyrations. There's all these pressures from the whole issue with the Iran war and the Gulf there, and just America kind of reeling from the gas prices, and then also we had the Carmelo Anthony murder case, which was kind of shocking to see how that all played out. And we also have this new environment with the social media, with all of our devices, all this new technology. It's kind of creating a strange atmosphere in our society where things are happening very fast. It doesn't take very long for people to find out what's going on when there's a crime or a major event. And our lives are being shaped in the society in this kind of larger kind of cyber mind that is being created within the media. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
sure.
It really intensifies political matters, I think.
Oh yeah, it's like everything's next door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's a smaller world, perhaps. So,
especially with AI now, where they have access to everything, and so it's a perfect system for the devil and his Antichrist, and we can see completely how you can't buy or sell unless you take a mark, because that whole system's in place now.
Yeah.
For the tribulation.
Yeah. You can feel it, and you can see how viral things go as far as like events, and I think there's a lot of ways with this AI that can direct our attention and our consciousness, and like what is going to the top of the media, and what is really everyone is going to see all at the same time. And so it's a new tool, and it's a new kind of capability that I think that we as a people are not really good at, like getting together all on the same page about what we're doing, and so this is a way for the elites to ultimately manipulate the populace. That's how I look at it.
Sure, totally agreed. It's another great tool in the hands of the Jesuits and their agents implementing the Pope's resort to the Dark Ages with his world system of all the nations subject to the political power of the Pope, or the temporal power. Yeah. I went to the Jesuit cemetery over at Warnersville over here last week, and I go there from time to time because I had an old friend that died. He was a Jesuit. His brother Suds, he loaned me my Jesuit cassock to wear at the 2002 Con. And he since died. And so I go over there and I take a look at his gravesite and look at all the others that are dying and being added to it. One of them was Frank R. Haig, the brother of General Alexander Haig. He is buried in that cemetery now. And in 2016, they changed the headstones because the Jesuits are, a military order. It used to be that you have the white headstone with a black base. And on the headstone, it was just the name, and then the date of birth, the obit, and then the ingressus, so when they entered to the Jesuit order, and then the day they died. Natus, ingressus, and obit. Those three things. And then they have, of course, their name, but nothing distinguishing them from anything. So I just looked around and I saw this large Jesuit cemetery, and I thought, this is the cemetery, one of the cemeteries of the most powerful military forces in world history, probably the most powerful, and absolutely disciplined. And the Walter Ciszek is buried there, who was the great Jesuit inquisitor in Russia for 20 years, running the Gulag there. And
I recall one time you were speaking about Walter Ciszek, and that you had just happened to see the Jesuit general was there during his a funeral or something to do with that. So
that kind
of shows you how important he was.
Yeah, absolutely. They went to his grave alone, and they have some rosaries on it, and a few other stones and other things. So he was very important. He carried out the order's Inquisition in Russia, and he was from Pennsylvania. He was a Pennsylvanian, and then he went over with another Jesuit to Poland, and then they brought him into Russia. But never a word about who he really was. You know, I was talking to Brother Sazina, who was a Jesuit there. He's a small fellow, and I kind of liked him. I gave him the gospel. I gave him a copy of my book, Vatican Assassins. And I said, Brother Saz, I said, when Walter Ciszek came back, I said, were his hands all gnarled, like he'd been in a gulag for 20 years? Or were they normal? And he looked at me, and then he looked down, and he said, oh, Walter. It finally occurred to him that Walter Ciszek was an inquisitor working with the KGB in the killing of those Orthodox peoples in the camps. So,
yeah, think about the order. I read and study where I can, and it seems like that they would have to have absolute total dedication, and they're totally convinced that what they are doing is for the greater glory of God and that it's right. And so they have no doubt in them, and they are able to, in the extremity of that, martial effort to try to expand what they believe is the will of God and the kingdom of God on earth. They're willing to go to great lengths. And I think that as they were established originally, they just, it seems that they weren't just established out of thin air, but there were certain forces, certain papal nobility, certain like an energy coming from the higher levels of Roman aristocracy and the papal knighthood orders, where they were infused with power from the very beginning as a military order, and with, you know, they didn't have to spend time like finding out how to operate. They already knew from the very get-go and were organized in this perfect kind of military phalanx.
That's right. Phalanx, very good. In fact, that's what Steinmetz calls it, a perfect phalanx.
Yeah.
In his History of the Jesuits. He wrote in 1848, something like that, 2 volumes. That's right. It's an elite military order. There is no disobedience among them. And because they have such a severe training to obedience, and then all the arts, and they're accountable to the superior. And the U.S. Marine Corps was modeled after the Jesuit order, to completely rob the individual of his personality and then reinfuse it with the spirit of the Jesuit order or Marine Corps. It's the same exact principles.
Yeah, it makes me think of like all that Rome brings to the table when it comes to so many centuries of like being professional operators of world empire. So, you know, like even going back to the Praetorian Guard, even going back to just all the machinations, all the different accoutrements of having to run a massive global empire, and like knowing the kind of things that work, the things that don't work, and having all the kind of pedagogy that comes from those, I guess, black nobility, although, you know, that are still in place. And so when they set in motion, I think there's the outward propaganda, the outward story that everyone knows. But I think that behind the scenes, there was, you know, they were putting in place something that would be the sword of the papacy, and executing their mission in the world, which was a military, like a worldly plan for world domination, you know, literally.
On Loyola's deathbed, he said, "Behold, I give you the world." And he points to a globe. Of course, they know the globe is ridiculous, but I give you the world because it's all about ruling the world. M.F. Cusack says in her book, The Black Pope, that the Jesuits are groomed to rule the world. And they don't know which part, but that's what they're groomed for. And so they're stationed throughout the world to carry out the orders of their superior as a military order for the purpose of subjugating all nations for the Pope. And there's no lack of discipline. In Steinmetz's work, it says the Jesuit general said, we even have men for martyrdom.
Right.
And so they'll do anything. They'll kill their mother, martyr, whatever they're ordered to do. It's perfect obedience. Titanic is a classic example. When they were ordered to sink the Titanic, the Brown was on it. Francis M. Brown was on it as a novice, and somebody from New York offered to pay his fare across the Atlantic, and so he sends a message to his provincial, and the provincial replied with 4 words: "Get off that ship." And so he got off and went to the bottom of the Atlantic and went 10,000 feet of water. So they are perfectly obedient. If he had not obeyed, he'd been dead.
So the purpose was to hit certain financial elites that were in the way and to help set up this central bank here in 1913. That was the plan.
That's right. They sunk the Titanic in 1912 and then set up the Federal Reserve in 13.
So I think of like Skull and Bones men, Knights of Malta, elite banking and industry, Wall Street, power titans, power elite, who are just getting ready to do this, and they have got to do what they got to do to get certain individuals out of the way.
They had to have their Federal Reserve Bank for their 30 Years' War to begin in 1915. So it was critical that they established that before the war, before the Guns of August, which is in 1914. So they were told, we have to get rid of John Jacob Astor, the Protestant, and we got to get rid of Guggenheim, and we have to get rid of Isidore Straus of Macy's. All these guys are resisting our Federal Reserve Act of R.J.P. Morgan, where they fashioned it at Jekyll Island there. And I was a trip to Jekyll Island several years ago, and I went into the building where they had fashioned that Federal Reserve Act, and I told the lady there that asked me why I was there, because I was by myself. And she said, "Well, what are you here for?" I said, "Well, I'm researching the establishment of the Federal Reserve in Jekyll Island here." And she says, "Oh, you need to get the book, The Jackals of Jekyll."
Write that down.
Yeah, The Jackals of Jekyll. Yeah.
So, think about the that process of getting to the point where they're going to establish the Federal Reserve system there. And at this point, when we go into 1929 and we go into the Great Depression, America is totally bankrupt. And so we're going to carry over our kind of de jure gold and silver hard money system, and we're going to turn it over to a fiat international borrowed money scheme and begin to borrow money from, they're going to set up like 24 banks, including Bank of America and other which are front companies, to basically become a lending system for us to get in debt to London banks, the Bank of England, etc. So let's talk about that. I mean, I think about the holdings there, the banking establishment there, and the square mile, and how they had set up Londinium a long time ago. This goes back to Hadrian's Wall. London was an outpost for Roman legions back before the papacy even was born. And so they always had a separate system of sovereignty, and it was set up as kind of an outpost and a treasure city over time. And so London becomes one of this triangle of power between Rome, London, and Washington, D.C. Not the outer city of London, but the inner city of London, which is, of course, the inner temple and the temple round and the temple chancery. So we're talking about the Temple Crown, which is the secret inner establishment of the London banking houses there.
Well, when the Queen would go to the old city of London, she would have to curtsy to the Lord Mayor. So the Lord Mayor was above her in the old city of London. Yeah,
from my reading of it, she would have to touch. He would bring out the sword, and she would touch it. It wasn't her sword, it was his sword, right? So people kind of reverse that and make it seem like the sovereignty was the other way around. But she had to touch and recognize his sword and his authority before she could come in.
Exactly right. Yeah. So the Jesuits took London. I maintain
Yeah.
no later than King George III. And some say that they took it with the bank that was set up in the late 1600s with Patterson. But they most assuredly got it all. They got it with the message when the Roost flew across the English Channel and reported that Napoleon had won.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused all the stocks to drop. And then the Jesuits in London bought all the stocks for pennies on the dollar, pennies on the crown, pennies on the pound. And then when the message came that Napoleon had lost, why then all the stocks went back up again. The order controlled it all. And no doubt they had used Rothschilds and some other banking families, but it all...
It reminds me of 1929, exactly.
Same thing. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So in 29, they had their orchestrated stock market crash, and there was two things that caused it. The Jesuits withdrew 40% of the credit in circulation, and then Joe Kennedy was the chief short seller that aided the crash, and which made him a Knight of Malta for that. So it was all arranged and plotted and planned. My poor communist grandmother said, that's the failure of capitalism. I said, no, Grandma. I said, this was done deliberately. She said, oh, you're out to sea in a rowboat.
Right. Yeah. I heard Percy Rockefeller as well, that he was involved in it. I'm just trying to check myself here. But I think Percy Rockefeller was one of the only skull and bones. It was only the Rockefellers to be a skull and bones man, but he also was a short seller during that time as well.
Well, there were three short sellers. There were three short sellers in there listed by Curtis Dahl in his book, My Manipulated Father-in-Law, FDR, My Exploited or Manipulated Father-in-Law by Curtis Dahl. And Joe Kennedy was one. I think Tom Bragg was another. And there was one other one. But they were all Irish Catholics. No Jews causing the stock market crash.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy how that... It seems like it wasn't that long ago, probably back when you were at Conspiracy Con, like in that period of time when we still had websites and dial-up internet and thing, the whole idea of this Zionism and this like weird Jew conspiracy, it was all really coming from Islam. It was always Islamic sites. It was always Muslims who harbored this intense, deeply sophisticated, like Zion conspiracy theory of Zionism, right? That's where I would hear those terms and that kind of logic. And now it's kind of spread all throughout, like the left and the Antifa and the trans movement, and everyone is glommed on. Even Tucker Carlson talks about Zionism, and I'm not really sure. It's like a buzzword. I'm not really sure if they know what that means or if it's just it's a category of like a way to disrespect and denigrate Christians in general, right? Just Bible believers. Which Romans are not, like Roman Catholics are not Bible believers, so they're definitely not Zionists, right? So that doesn't apply to them.
Well, yeah, when the fact is that the greatest Zionists, the ones in power, were the Jesuits who created the Zionist movement in England, and they were the ones tutoring Theodore Herzl and got him an audience with the Pope in 1904. And after that, he founds the movement for a Palestine, Zionism. Without the Jesuits, there's no Theodore Herzl. And of course, it's Masonic Judaism.
And he was murdered pretty soon after that, if I remember you telling me that detail.
He died shortly thereafter.
So he served his purpose and he was on his way. Yeah.
And Ben Gurion took over, and he was a real traitor. He was a dear friend of James Jesus Angleton, who manned the Vatican desk and the Israeli desk in the CIA. So all run by the Knights.
Now, when his name is James Jesus Angleton, is that Jesus for the Society of Jesus? It's got to be, right?
No,
I mean, okay.
No, that was his name. Yeah, but he's working for him, and he was.
But his parents named him that, so they must have known. Like, there must have been some intentionality in regards to the Jesuit order if they named him Jesus Angleton. That's, or maybe they meant Jesus. I don't know, but
more Jesus. Yeah,
right,
it's
gotcha.
Kind of a Spanish thing. Mm-hmm. But he sure was. He was the second most powerful man in the CIA for years. Had a counterintelligence. Him with Raymond Rocca. Raymond Rocca was a powerful Knight of Malta, Italian Roman Catholic, worked with Angleton to promote the Cold War and to blame Castro for the assassination of Kennedy. They were untouchable, those guys.
Yeah, there's this underlying CIA mythology about during that time, like searching for the mole, right? The mole.
Yes.
That there was always this
Yes,
concept. If you look through the old CIA movies, including anyway, I can't think of it, but yeah, there's this idea that they're searching for the mole, but it wasn't ultimately those guys. They were the mole.
it was
right?
Angleton.
Yeah.
Angleton was the mole. And this guy in CIA, Eric Tim, he found out it was Angleton. And he was going to do something about it. And he was playing tennis and he fell down dead. So they killed Eric Tim for going after Angleton.
So thinking about London, I just see what's going on with the king there, King Charles III. He's become like a full-blown Muslim. Apparently London is like 48% illegal invaders, sorry, or just foreign, just these people they just imported in there. I think the whole place only has like 10 or 13 million people altogether, if I'm not mistaken. And they've just imported a huge body of psychopath religionists into the country. And I'm just trying to follow what is the plan here? Are they're going to create this like body shock reaction in the culture where people are going to flip out and ultimately have to fight these guys, and they're going to have a new crusade, or what's the plan here?
Well, I believe that this is part of the Jesuit order's quest to destroy any sort of representative government, to go into an absolute dictator. And the Jesuits taught us that, because they were in Hollywood, taught us that in V for Vendetta. As it starts out, you have this white dictator that is doing the speaking here. So to show you right there, they intend to bring England to a new right dictatorship. But how to do that? You have to have this extremism. So they brought in all these East Indians and all these Muslims. And they're all people, they're brown skins, they're all people of color. And they put them in places of power to oppress the white people there, to drive the white people into desperation. Of course, they've committed over 1 million rapes in the last 40, 50 years. Chris Pinto was good to prove that on one of his broadcasts. So they're raping and pillaging and plundering, and the white people are disarmed. But, they've abandoned the Reformation Bible. They've abandoned the Reformation in England. And so they've become good for nothing except to drive them into the extreme of the new right. And when you drive these white men to the extreme of the new right and they're going to fight, you got a real killing machine. And that's what they're going to do with the British men. And so they're going to round up all these guys. They're going to send them to camps. It's going to be the same way in France and other nations there in Europe. So they're going to unify Europe over the Islamic threat. They have to have a common threat for a common unity.
And they got to get rid of the Muslims too, to boot.
Well, yeah. Well, they're going to get rid of them. Sure, they plan on getting rid of the Muslims, because all the Muslims they bring out of the Middle East into Europe gives a rest to the Pope's revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem or Israel. So it benefits Israel by bringing these Muslims over to Europe. And then ultimately, they're going to be rounded up and sent to the camps.
So we can see coming into view this massive one world global religion. And you can see that we've been talking about this a long time, but if you're not very many people that I know or that I've met or deal with, even the smart ones, have spent a lot of time to kind of research the Quran, because it's drab, it's kind of neurotic, and it's a little bit psychopath like literature, but in there, deeply ingrained within the Quran and the surahs and the hadiths and everything, is this teaching that Mary is most holy. And it brings with it this kind of like Dark Ages understanding of Mary as like a deity, as the Queen of Heaven, as sacred, and it's kind of instills it in the Quran. It even talks about Mary like 50 times, like maybe 3 or 4 times as much as it references Jesus, right? So the importance and the sacredness of Mary within Islam is completely framed in there, and this goes back to the 7th century. So it's a satanic plan. There's no way that men could have the capacity to formulate such incredible genius. I don't want to say it's evil genius, but few people are noticing it. I think that it's kind of like hitting the modern world and the Tucker Carlsons of the world as like some kind of divine revelation that somehow that Rome and Islam are connected in this religious sacredness. And I think that a lot of the weaker apostate nationalists, the neo-nationalists on the right, are getting sucked into this idea. I noticed that Milo recently posted this post that said that it was Catholics and Muslims against Protestants and Jews. And it didn't it didn't take me long to research him. And apparently he's a recovering homosexual who went back to Rome, and he has a fascination with Islam. So he meant that the Catholics and Jews, or the Zionists, are facing this, what he can see as like an actual conflict with Rome and Islam. So I think that's where the thing's breaking down. Yeah.
You mean the Protestants and Jews?
The Protestants and Jews. The Protestants and Jews against the Catholics and Muslims. I think that's the way this thing is. And it's starting to align with prophecy. If you look at prophecy, it's starting to make sense. Because
I said today on my podcast that all the fascism, the three great fascist movements of Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco, all worked with Islam. All of them. Mussolini was given the sword of Islam by Libya. Mussolini was. Franco talked about the Hajj, and he brought in these Muslim Moor troopers to rape, pillage, and plunder the Spanish Protestants. Yeah. And then Hitler did the same thing with his Hajj Amin al-Husseini, Mufti of Jerusalem. He brought him to Berlin for 4 years while they were busy destroying the Orthodox of Croatia and Yugoslavia. And so that's how they created the Hanschar division of the SS. It was all Muslim. So the Mufti of Jerusalem oversaw that. So you have Hitler and the Mufti, fascism and Islam working together for the destruction of the Orthodox peoples and the Jews, and of course the Protestants being involved too. So they're going to do that here. I maintain we get our new right here. Somehow, some way, they're going to unite it with Sunni Islam.
Yep. Yeah, I could see that. I think that you have to get there when you look at prophecy, when you look at this point where the Antichrist can step out in the third rebuilt Hebrew temple, and he can unite all the religions, the Jews, Islam, all the different facets of apostate Christianity into a global movement that has total power, and that bow to him and bow to the image of the beast. And that's what we need to see for prophecy to be fulfilled. So that's exactly what will happen. And
the final pope of Rome will be the beast, because every pope is a placeholder for the Antichrist. I have a chart on it. You'd love it. It's made in 1898, something like that, of a tree, and every branch is a pope. And at the top, you have a equilateral triangle, which is the Jesuits IHS at the top. So every pope is a placeholder for the Antichrist yet to come. So the final pope of Rome will have the covenant with many nations for 7 years, Daniel 9:27. Then shortly before the middle part of it, he's killed with a sword, Revelation 13:14. And then he comes back to life. And the soul and spirit come back to life, but he also is possessed by the devil. And then from that time on, he has his false prophet, his Jewish false prophet, right on the Temple Mount. And all religions will end, because when this false prophet's calling fire out of heaven, and the statue of the beast is talking in the third temple, and everybody sees
it'll be
stone
Mary.
Statues.
Yeah, I can see an image of Mary being the perfect instrument by which they could get Islam and Jews and everyone to kind of join in this system of worship. And it reminds us, of course, of Daniel. Daniel showed the image. Even Nebuchadnezzar created an image and tried to force everyone to bow and worship it. So it's the continuous demonic urge towards this system. I look at the papacy as like a potentiality for the Antichrist at any moment. So whenever it can break out, it's like a continuous force. And whenever it can break through and break out, it will do it. And it will be just as, of course, the Bible predicts, as you say. And when that happens, it'll be that pope, and he'll be ready to step into that role at that moment.
That's right. His 10 kings will destroy Rome, destroy the Vatican, destroy that vessel that the devil has used to bring his final pope, the Antichrist, the beast of power. That'll be the end of all religion. No more Islam, no more Romanism, no more Judaism, none of it. It will be now worship this man who claims to be God and has all these powers through his false prophet.
That's what the Jesuit order has got to be laboring away at, is bringing this about, setting the stage for it, preparing for it. It seems like they're masters of everything to do with the Bible. I think they look at themselves as worshiping the reborn kind of Son of God in their superior general. They look at him as the force of the will of God and the hand behind the vicar of Christ. So and I noticed that preterism, like we were talking about, these preterists are starting to get pretty strong in the Christian church now, and they discuss this idea that the Jewish temple age ended the kind of the Christian understanding that we have of prophecy, in the sense that Titus, when he came and destroyed the temple, that he was the reborn, the reemergence of the Christian ethic in Christ, and that the new Roman Empire is the fulfillment of prophecy, in the sense that Jesus has returned, right? And it's kind of mind blowing. I can't even follow that. It kind of makes me dizzy.
It's all allegorical junk.
Yeah, but it really is having an effect in the churches.
It's all allegorical junk, and it's meaningless.
It's totally effective on these church goers who are not Bible believers. They're not studied in the Bible, and they just take for face value what they're being told. So
that's exactly right. As long as they do not read the prophecies literally, as long as they don't distinguish between Israel and the church, they're in complete and total darkness.
It takes a little bit of labor. It takes a little bit of curiosity and study, and I think it takes some impetus of the Holy Spirit to draw you into it. I think people are blind to it. They just are completely blocked from understanding prophecy. They don't make the effort at the same time as the Lord is not inviting them to see it, because it's right there. Sure. It's clear as day.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's clear as day. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, I feel bad for.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just feel bad for Europe. I know that they had this new movie come out. It's called Citizen Vigilante. You might see it just in the social media memes. They're talking about this new movie. And it's basically a movie about a vigilante who gets revenge on these people who are raping the Europeans, these Muslims, and these the woke left who are just attacking and murdering people in Europe. And so this guy goes on a rampage and begins to fight back, And so it kind of puts its fingers on the pulse of the desperation that we were talking about of the Europeans as they begin to react now. The violence is becoming so great that they are starting to have a visceral reaction now. And like we were saying, in Ireland, they're beginning to move around the city there in Dublin and basically burn down homes and run off these people who are being brought in there.
Yeah. I have no problem with that. I didn't want them. They didn't want them brought in. The Pope brought them in to upturn everything. These criminals are not punished. The government's criminal. They don't punish crime. The purpose for government is to punish evil and reward good. If they don't punish evil, there is no government, and you don't owe an allegiance to it. And so, therefore, you need to do something before they destroy your house and home and everything. I'm totally for vigilantism if the government's not going to punish crime. There's nothing wrong with it.
That's not the issue that they have is that, and it's an outrage on social media because you can film it. You can see it filmed on the streets of Europe every day. Is the people who are doing the attacking, these marauding invaders,
Pakistani Muslims. That's what they are.
And now North Africans, all kinds of fellows are attacking. And then whenever you call the police to do something about it, they arrest you. And they're returning the rape victims. They're returning the rape victims back to the rapists. It's so in your face.
That makes the cops criminals. So the government is a criminal government. And according to Lex Rex, you don't owe any allegiance to a criminal government. It goes back to Calvinism. If they're going to resist this, they better start reading Rutherford's Lex Rex and a few other things. Otherwise, they'll be totally consumed by this criminal government in the UK, in Europe, whatever, and they're destroying their own people. But they know that the Jesuits will raise up the advocates for revenge and getting back what they've done, because the Jesuits will control them just as they controlled Hitler.
They'll control the reaction.
Control the reaction after the wicked Versailles Treaty. And Hitler absolutely did the right thing in denouncing the Versailles Treaty. But little did they know what that would entail. And then we're going to get the same thing here. We're going to get the same thing in Europe. You got
Hitler sold him a bill of goods. He came out looking like he's going to be the solution, and he was an insider. He was a controlled asset, and they used him to do what they ultimately wanted to do. And it wasn't it had nothing to do with what he promised or what the demagoguery that he sold to them. But he just ended up being. It's the same thing with Stalin in Russia and Trotsky and all that. They sold him a bill of goods and convinced them that everything would be roses.
Right. Read the book. Hitler was a Jew. Hitler was a British agent by Hallett. Absolutely. So the Jesuit control of Great Britain brought Hitler to power, aided by Mussolini, and totally controlled him. That's why he escaped Europe after the war, went to South America, and lived, I think, till 2000 as Father Kresge. And when I forget the year he died, but he had a funeral of 2,000 people there for the death of the priest, Father Kresge, and he was really Hitler.
Right.
Sean David Morton talked about this in a meeting I was in. I thought that was brilliant.
No, I'm totally convinced that the high level Third Reich operators, the insiders got out. They got Vatican Red Cross passports, yep. And they spread all over the globe, and they collapsed that thing, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They were there to execute the Counter-Reformation judgment and to destroy that Lutheran place, and that's what they did.
That's exactly what they did. Unholy Trinity shows you that in the Odessa file. Absolutely right. They destroyed the Reformation in Europe and on its ruins to make a commercial entity that would serve the papacy.
With the EU?
Germany would be the hub. Yeah, the EU. Started by Redinger. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, it's the new revived Holy Roman Empire. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we do? Well, we need to live right before the Lord, read his word, confront these things openly, don't let it prosper, resist unto blood, striving against sin, Hebrews 12:4, and never turn the other cheek. It doesn't apply to us.
Well, I think the turn the other cheek applies to your own brothers and your own neighbors and family around you, and the people that you owe that duty of forgiveness to, in your, but not your enemy, not like people who are trying to kill you. Yeah. That's not what he meant.
As much as Christ was only talking to Israel in anticipation of the reestablishment of the Davidic kingdom. None of Matthew 5, 6, and 7 has a word to do with the church.
Yeah, we could apply it to ourselves in the sense that our own friends and neighbors and family and people that in our church that we should try to forgive 70 times 7. But our own enemies, the invaders who are here to sack, loot, and murder us and rape us, we should kill them. We fight them,
That's right. That's right. You have to meet them with a sword of just defense. That's the only thing they respect. The Muslims think Christian people are all a bunch of sissies. And unfortunately, a lot of it's true because the churches in England, they're turning the other cheek and letting all this getting away with all this murder. So they just need to realize it's not for us. It doesn't lie within us to be at peace with those people who want to do it. And if the government's not going to punish them, then we have to take issue and do it ourselves. I'm going to give an example. Some of these savage Muslims raped a Russian girl in Germany. And the Russian men went to the government and said, listen, these Muslims have raped one of our women. What are you going to do about it? They said, well, there's not much we can do about it. And so the Russian men said, okay. 2 or 3 months later, these Russians pulled up to this large Muslim setting, killed every one of them except one, and told them, you will never touch our Russian women again. And those Muslims are careful not to touch any Russian women when they're engaging in their gang rape.
Yeah, I can't say at all that we've been seeing that any Russian women have been hurt at all. They've been Swedish, they've been German, they've been British girls, but I haven't heard of a single Russian girl get touched.
That's right, because the Russian men will take them out, and that's how we should be. You touch our women, we will kill you.
Yeah,
because if we touch their women, they're going to kill us, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
They just have total disrespect for the wimpy gimpiness of white men of Europe and America now, letting them get away with murder.
Yeah, I noticed that just seeing some of these videos, just how these men are reacting in England. I don't know how to advise them. I'm not trying to be like a Sunday morning quarterback, but I know that they're under great duress. But I noticed that they're getting beat up. They're going to stand in the way of some of these women getting attacked. There's all these videos, and the men are just completely helpless. They're getting stabbed. They're getting beaten up. Mm-hmm. They're not fighting. They're not fighters. They're not fighting men.
Right. They're not fighting back. That's right. That's why I say every white man needs to take karate. You need to learn to kill with a knife, and you need to learn to kill with a gun. I have a supporter, Sam. He was in London, and his wife was speaking or reminds someone on the preacher's corner, whatever it was, and some black savage that spoke English took some big rock or something and hit her square in the chest with it. Terribly hurt her. And I said, what'd you do? He said, well, he ran away. I couldn't get him. I said, uh-huh. Well, I said, what you need to do, Sam, is you need to carry a knife. And when anybody does that, you cut their throat and drive the knife right through their heart. And then they're going to learn you don't do that stuff. And if the government wants to prosecute you for murder, well, I guess you're going to have to pay in their wicked, illegal courts. But you don't let them get away with that.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. I think Americans are kind of getting geared up for what is the difficulty ahead that I think we're dealing with. I think our federal government is dragging this out and making this intensely painful. They're creating the dialectic in dealing with these issues, as far as even the Supreme Court, and just now recently deciding that, okay, you can take these individuals who have been here for now 15 years or 10 years on some kind of temporary security here in the United States, and they're just making the issue polarized within the populace, so that they're not executing justice, they're not executing what is right. Everyone can see that it's wrong, and now that these people have been here, kind of milking the system, getting free hotel rooms, and just getting all this free taxpayer money. Now they're going to be enraged when they have to be forced to leave. So they're creating the conflict here. It should have been dealt with right away, and they're letting it build up.
What should be done with the men that allowed this to bring that to happen? You have to bring them to trial for treason, like Joe Biden and Barry Davis Obama and George Bush and a host of them. And you try them for treason, and then you hang them in the public square. Once you start doing that, things will change. Just like when they cut off the head of Charles I in England for his high treason against the British people, then things started to change a whole lot. These people have to be executed. It's the only solution. They don't change. You can't rejuvenate. You can't rejuvenate evil. You got to punish it. You got to pull the weeds if the grass is going to grow.
Yeah. No,
when we Calvinists, we Baptist Calvinists have been the best at it. Our problem is to get leaders that we can follow. So the Jesuits always have this gatekeeping of there's no leaders that we could ever follow that would want to do that. But we can never have a Cromwell or a George Washington or an Andrew or Stonewall Jackson. They keep those guys from ever coming to power with their control over the election, the vote, and who gets in office. Yep.
So as we move forward here in America, we're coming up against these elections. What do you think would be the most? I think that for the Democrats to begin to tear back power and create this kind of intense volatility in the government would be the most destructive thing. So I feel like that's what will happen. I think that we'll see that there'll be this balance of power is going to kind of go back in the direction of the Democrats, despite their low popularity, despite the fact that they have mastered cheating in elections. I'm sure the Republicans do in various ways. Whoever the uniparty wants to position, that's how it looks to me. I don't believe in like a real Republican, like a natural, organic Republican versus Democrat political system. I think that we have a uniparty power elite that begins to operate behind the scenes and shift this thing wherever it suits them. Just like seeing in New York these recent Mamdani acolytes, these kind of leftist, communist, Muslim sycophants that they have, that they're winning, they're going to go to Congress. They're going to be 100 times worse than AOC. And I think that's what we have on this coming into the foreground.
That little Jesuitess, she's playing her part well. She's nothing. She's an idiot. And they put her there to be an agitator. And so they put Mandela there for the same reason, to be an agitator. They didn't elect him. He wasn't elected. Yeah. That's if the vote's totally controlled. And so they do that to agitate, to the end that they're going to drive all these angry, white, Roman Catholic men who are killers into the new right. And when that happens, it's over. And they will be joined by the Protestants and the Baptists and all the others that are sick of all this persecution. And now they're going to have one mean killing machine. We're going to the new right. They're going to put their capital in Denver. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be a two-front war. In the meantime, there'll be roundups all around the country. They're going to the FEMA camps. They're going to fill these FEMA camps.
Nobody will be right enough. Nobody will be far right enough. They'll start eating their own. Yeah. I can see it. Right. I can see it going there fast. I saw some memes where they had the pictures of some guys. It's like these memes. It's like internet warfare and these ideological war here. But it shows a bunch of guys wearing red MAGA hats, and they have swords and they're chopping off the heads of all these like Democrats, or they called them MIGAs, which is Make Israel Great Again. So they have these MIGA, Make Israel Great Again, Zionist hats on, and they're chopping their heads off. So the new right is ready to go. They're brimming. They got their anti-Semitic notes here. They got their memo, their operating orders, and they're ready to go.
Right, and Tucker Carlson's building him. He's never separated from the Republican Party, but all this anti-Jewish fury that he's teaching and bringing Nick Fuentes to the forefront, building a new anti-Jew new right. That's right.
He had to be of this kind of ilk and this kind of sensibility the whole time. I think he's just letting it out now. They're all revealing how they really feel. Oh, yeah. He loves to go to Dubai and like pow around with the Muslims and say nice things about Islam, and so he's the most kind of demonic, like Freemasonic wretch in my mind.
That's right, absolutely. He is a lying, cheating coward. That's what he is.
It makes me think of, Islam is deeply ingrained in Freemasonry. It goes way back. Even the emblem of the square and the compass has a certain occult affiliation with Islam, because in Islam they have the great cube, the great black cube, and they circumambulate around it in a big circle around this cube. Yep. So it's a big compass and square as part of the initiation imagery that if you get deeply up into Freemasonry, you begin to see that that's part of what they have in the background for you, as you're going to be joined with that. Yeah.
If you read the book Into the Light with Shaw, when he wrote that, he shows you that way high up you have the high Freemasons giving complete total allegiance to Islam. And every Mason is an ashlar stone. That's what you read in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. An ashlar stone is in the rough, but it's black, and through the rites of Freemasonry you become perfected and a better man. Yeah. A cube. That's right. It's a black cube. The same thing with 2001: Space Odyssey. It starts out with a black cube. Yeah. Same way with the Borg in Star Trek. They traveled in a black cube. So all Masonic, and there's a unification of all these religions: Freemasonry, Catholicism, apostate Protestantism, you name it, all in Freemasonry.
Yeah, it's all coming from these ancient Babylonian mystery religions.
Yes.
And which became more perfected during the Greeks with the Pythagorean order, which kind of carried that element through time into Rome. That secret society, that system of this systematic worship. They're an ancient brotherhood, and that's kind of the force I was talking about as far as the Jesuits. It seems like they have a deep level of occult knowledge about this system of Babylonian priestcraft that goes way back, that stays continuous. Going back to Simon Magus, they were worshippers of this ancient systemology, and I think that the Jesuits keep both sides. They keep both sides as far as Luciferianism and the Christian biblical concept. They keep both sides in perfect order as they operate. So.
Well, the Jesuits at the top, they run all the secret societies. Satan has consolidated all of his earthly power into them, and the Black Pope and his associates, his assistants. And that's how he keeps things in perfect order. Anybody who gets out of order, they send the mob or the intelligence community to kill him. So they have total control over the political parties and who's going to run, and nobody's talking about it, because if you do, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. As though things just happen by coincidence, So they've got the narration, and it's going to take a real repentance and hard preaching by certain preachers to reverse this, and total denunciation of Rome, that the font of all wickedness and sin, speaking as a man in politics, is Rome, and that's the font.
Yeah, they have the power. There's no doubt about it. Anyone who doesn't see it is marvelously blind. It's blind. It's an intense demonic blindness. I think that they're cultivating this focus on Israel. Of course, Israel has been set up to be this focus of hatred. They positioned them there. They gave them that ridiculous 6-pointed sorcery star that they have, and they've kind of taken it in. People will believe whatever you tell them.
Yeah, that was no Star of David. Right. I remember I talked with Barry Chambers and Joel Boehnerman. They're probably the best historians in Israel at the time, and Joel said to me, "So that star, it's not." I said, "That's not. It's nothing to do with David.
Right.
That's the star of Remphan, their god." And you can see the very six-pointed star in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. They're sporting that there, so it's a totally Roman Babylonian symbol, having nothing to do with the racial Hebrew Jewish Israelites.
Yeah, they like to show ancient archaeology where there was Jewish implements that have that star, and I'm thinking they shouldn't have been using it then either. They shouldn't be using it now. They should have never used it. They got into all kinds of Baal worship and Ashtaroth worship and all kinds of horrible stuff, and they shouldn't have been using that. And so they know that it's a symbol of wickedness. And
star of your God, Remphan.
Yeah.
In Acts. Yep. Well, they should use a palm tree or something like that.
Yeah, they do have like a nice symbol which is like a menorah with wreaths around it. I love that one. I can accept that.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful Jewish symbol, but the star, I just can't do it. I can't. It makes me ill. I can't accept it. I don't know what it is.
But that shows you that the labor Zionists that started Israel working for the Pope, because that's the Pope's star.
Right.
That's what they made. It's what they made the Jews wear before Israel starts. Yeah, they made the Jews in Europe wear that star. It's people. They made them wear it in the Dark Ages.
Yeah, I was thinking about Napoleon. He has a history when he goes into Rome, and they made all the Jews wear yellow hats and all kinds of stuff. Like they've been marking them this whole time. You know, it's been a continuous thing of Rome to make the Jews indicate who they are through like yellow symbols and stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Pay special Jew tax. I mean, what's his name? Larkin covers a lot of that in his book, The Dispensational Truth, greatest book in dispensational truth in the world. He covers a lot of that history, what the papacy did to the Jews in Europe. Mm-hmm.
So it's called The Dispensational Truth?
Yeah, greatest book, Dispensational Truth, the greatest book on dispensational truth in the world by Clarence Larkin, and he published it in 1918. And it's full of charts. It's nothing but chart after chart after chart after chart. But he misses that the beast or the Antichrist is the final Pope of Rome.
Right. But they see Rome, but they don't follow it to the papacy. It's remarkable. I see this all the time. They can see that Daniel is clearly pointing to Rome, and so is Revelation. But they can't quite see who the pinnacle of Roman power becomes in this man of sin. I think you have to be. It has to be revealed to you, Pastor Phelps. I literally think that people have a block, like they have like scales on their eyes or something. Like they literally cannot see what is like open to us, which is clearly visible to us. I think that the Jesuits are well aware, but in their view, it's a game of chess. It's a chessboard of black and white. In their view, they understand that Christian Bible believers view the papacy as the Antichrist, but they view the papacy as the seat of Christ's power on the earth, and it's holy.
Yeah, they view the papacy as the vehicle to bring their beast, their Antichrist, to power. And I'm totally convinced when he comes to power, the Jesuit order will be his great servants in administering his oppressive, murderous government for 3.5 years. They're not going away.
They would have to. There is no other instrument that could facilitate any of the power. There's other priestly orders and they do their thing, but they're not literally the actual like the thugs, like the actual like brown shirts, the street enforcers of the papacy are these fellows, and they get to a place where I think they initiate themselves to a higher degree of intensity and extremism about this whole thing. It's their cult, you know, and for it they will kill and they will take action and they will go to whatever level. And you can see men can be made to do this. You can see it in Islam. In some ways, you can see it in Mormonism, that people can be, this kind of extremism can be facilitated within men once they become true believers, you know?
It's all the doctrine of work salvation. If I can get you to believe in work salvation, that you got to do what I tell you to do to be saved, to go to heaven, whatever, you'll do anything I tell you to do. Work salvation is the foundation for all their wickedness and sin. And that's why they hate the gospel of grace, that there's nothing we can do, that Christ has died for our sins, buried and rose again, and by grace he is saved through faith, not of works. They hate that because works keeps their system together.
Yeah, they literally think that they're increasing God's holiness and goodness and greatness by what they're doing. It's for the greater good of God, or, you know, the greater glory of God. God's glory wouldn't be so great unless they did it. right?
Unless we did it. That's
Yeah.
right. So that's work salvation, as though God needs a greater glory. You kidding me? But their God needs the greater glory of them conquering the world for him, for it.
It's the same thing in Islam. It's the same underlying concept.
Same thing.
Yeah. The Allah needs you to do it. Allah's not going to sleep tonight. He's going to be ill if you don't throw acid on that woman's face or whatever the thing is.
Okay.
It's totally demonic.
You don't cut the heads off all those Coptic Christians by the Muslim Brotherhood, line them up, cut their heads off. If you don't do
Allah's
that,
going to know. Right.
That's right. So
I was reading Popery, Puseyism, and Jesuitism, and it's such an incredibly fascinating book.
It is.
I'm just blown away. It's not very long, but it's intense.
Years ago, 35 years ago, or at least that long, I found it in an old Mennonite bookstore. And I'd heard of it, and I was shaken as I opened the book, and I wondered, they probably wanted $500 for it. 75 cents.
Right.
I said, oh, thank you, Lord. I bought that book. I read it, put a lot of it in my Vatican Assassins, where it says the Jesuits ruled the world back in 1872, something like that, when DeSantis wrote it.
Yeah, thank the Lord for archive.org, because I have so many books on there to read. But it shows in that book the process of going through these exercises and what they do and how they lock them in the room, and they go through this process of bringing you to kind of like this isolated desperation, and they kind of psychologically traumatize you, and then they put the skull in there, and it's intense. I'm like, this is it. Yeah. This is what they have learned after centuries and centuries of programming and making a systematic cult. They know how to do it the best.
Wiley talks about it in his book, History of Protestantism, in volume 2, chapter 15. He talks about what they do and how they traumatize them. And there's only two cities that matter, Babylon and Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jerusalem, the city of God, Babylon, the city of the devil. And so that's what they're building now. That's what they totally control now. They have to rebuild Babylon. They got Jerusalem that's rebuilt in preparation for the 70th week.
Yeah, I'm reading right now. I'm doing a recording and trying to read through A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt. And he has a little section in there, and this goes back to 1993. And at that time, they hadn't rebuilt Babylon. They hadn't gone in there and really started to do what they are doing now, like making it a UNESCO World History Site and making where you can visit it. They're building it up intensely.
Yes.
And
they rebuilt the Ishtar Gate there.
Yeah. At that time, when he wrote the book, none of that had happened, and he kind of dismissed the idea that the actual physical city of Babylon would be in play in the end times. But now we've come to this place where it's definitely in play. It's definitely part of the story. Yeah.
Jeremiah 50, Jeremiah 51, and Revelation 18. That's all rebuilt literal Babylon.
I think about the statue, you have the statue that Daniel sees, and it has this physical property of standing up, and its head is Babylon, and that's a physical geographic place. And you go down through the empires, and then the feet of it is standing in Rome, because that's the Roman Empire, right? And so you can see that it's this it's almost like it casts a shadow. Like if this image is standing in Rome and standing up, and the sun is hitting it, you can see that it's almost like it's casting a shadow where the head is all the way over to Babylon, and it's a continuous system right around the Mesopotamia.
Yeah, and remember it's top heavy too. The heaviest metals on top, gold and little lighter silver. So it has to fall. The 10 toes of clay and iron, the weakest of all, the lightest of all. So it has to topple. Yeah,
it's just a matter of time. Mm-hmm. And I think that I wonder, as we look forward in time, if we're going to look at some kind of massive meteor strike. There's certain indicators in the Bible that seem to point to it. I think that we could be.
You have wormwood hitting the earth in the tribulation.
We have the rock without hands that strikes the feet.
No, that's Christ. That's Christ with his kingdom.
Yeah, but that's symbolically, but also it could overlap. There's so many facets to prophecy. It could also point to a striking of the earth. That would upset the order of the earth so much. It would never return to normal again, I think,
Well, that's one of the judgments. I think it's one of the trumpet judgments.
Yeah.
During the last act.
I can see the earth is being struck. The 8 hours of darkness, a third of the day and a third of the night are struck. Mm-hmm. So you can see that if you hit the earth right, you could really change the way things operate in the larger scheme of things, as far as the cosmology. Could definitely could wreck the world. I think that's what we're looking at, is this tribulation period coming, and nothing will be the same.
Everything in the ocean dies.
Right.
Every fish in the ocean will die. The springs will be poisoned. The trees will be burned up. Most of the grass will be burned up. When Christ returns, the earth is in a total shambles. And had he not returned, no flesh would be saved.
Right.
So then that's why he has to recreate the earth when he comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what he said in Matthew 18. In the regeneration, you shall be sitting on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So he has to regenerate the earth at his second coming.
Yeah, no, even Peter talks about a fervent heat. The earth was destroyed by water during the flood, but there will be a fervent heat. I wonder how much of this is going to be man-made and how much is going to be the direct incidence of God's action and direct judgment.
Well, that's the end of the millennial kingdom, when the earth is destroyed with a fervent heat, and then you have the great white throne judgment. So that's the end of the first earth.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been an hour. We got to spend another hour with you. As we go out and kind of close it out, what have you been working on lately? I heard that I spoke with Pastor Jason Cooley a little bit. He said that he was working on some projects with you here and there, and you guys were busy on some things, so that's good to hear.
Well, one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to go after this anti-Jewish fury and show how it's not grounded in truth or true history or what's happening right now, for the attempt to set back all this anti-Jewish hatred here that's starting here. Mm-hmm. And that's Tucker Carlson, that's Fuentes, all those centers, to expose exactly what they're doing and the lies they're telling, that the Jews don't. Christ said the Jews run nothing till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And Jerusalem's trodden down by the Gentiles. That means the Jews don't run Jerusalem.
Right.
The Pope runs Jerusalem, the Gentiles.
The Knights of Malta, right there.
Knights of Malta.
The Papal Knights. Exactly. Yeah, they've been there a long time. They were there long before 1948. I mean, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they were running the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem for, until the Muslims destroyed it, 1291. But that's where you have all the kings of Jerusalem there. They're laying claim to it. That's right, because the Jews don't run anything. They never have. They haven't run it since Nebuchadnezzar, 605 BC, when he commanded and took it over. So since the times of the Gentiles will continue to the second coming of Christ. You see, and that's what makes Christ's coming so significant to the Jews, because they look, certain of the elect were looking for redemption in Jerusalem. What's that mean? They were looking for being loosed from the Roman yoke politically. That's why. And that's why they rejoiced in him, because here's our deliverance. He's going to save us from the Romans, because we've been living under horrible, terrible Gentile tyranny for 600 years. And he's finally arrived. That's the key right there. He came to establish a geopolitical kingdom premised on the national repentance of the nation, which was the ministry of John the Baptist. But it's put off, and so
it's coming.
It's coming.
A young generation in Jerusalem will be ready for him and embrace him. And
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. The kingdom will be taken from this generation and given to another generation more worthy of repentance. Didn't say they weren't ever going to establish the kingdom. It says it's going to be given to another generation of Hebrew Jewish Israelites, and they'll inherit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be the pattern. You can see that happening again and again. We were mentioning one time briefly this issue with which I like to return to. I'm fascinated by this issue of Martin Luther and this entire, which I see as I study it more, that there's an intense kind of like a mainstream, university level historian propaganda around the idea of Martin Luther and his book, The Jews and Their Lies, or the book that was forged, that was wrote in his name. And it's a very difficult subject matter to study, but you can see that there's this whole like kind of background mythology built up around this idea that somehow, because all of his entire work for decades before this book, he is and his entire theology is reaching out to the Jews. It's extending the typical biblical gospel message of hope and salvation to the Jews and their restoration. He talks about it. He preaches about it. But then suddenly, at the very end of his life, he takes a turn in this particular book. That's how the story goes. And suddenly he's angry at the Jews for not accepting Jesus, and he writes this horrible a book of condemnation that goes along with this idea that the Jews are cursed, that the Jews are Christ killers, and he suddenly changes his whole theological message. And the idea is that he's angry.
I teach a course on that. I teach a course on that. It's $1,500. It's a couple of day course. You have your 3-ring binder, and I go through every tidbit on the Jews and their lies, and I show you he could have never written it. Mm-hmm. That wasn't his theology nor his manner of writing. Period. Everything he espoused in there to persecute the Jews, to burn down to make them put them to work. All of that is Rome. Luther would never have done that. You got Nicholas Lenker's work. He's a classic American historian on Martin Luther. I think he wrote I have his 8-volume set here. He wrote it in like 1908. There's not one word in there on the Jews and their lies.
Huh. That's a good point.
I just finished another book, A Concise History of the Baptists by Orchard. He wrote it in 1858. He talks about Luther towards the end of the book and criticizes him for some of the things that he did. But he could have really criticized him if he wrote on the Jews and their lies. Not there. Not there.
Yes, it's supposed to be a totally accepted fact of history. And I look at it, and it's so strange. And AI will tell you, if you go talk to AI will just pump out this kind of standardized cookie cutter message about this, that was Luther's book. But if you press AI and you ask the right questions and you kind of you prompt it the right way, you can get the AI to talk about how the book is different, how it does have a totally different theology, and it just it separates suddenly from all the other works that it takes basically a 90-degree turn and changes. Yeah, it's a fascinating discussion to see that they forged that. There are not very many people who could forge it, right? There's not that many people who have the skill or the capability.
I read the whole thing, and it was some brilliant minds that put it together. I learned a few things. It was the brilliant Jesuits that put this together, and they were very familiar with dispensationalism because there's a Jesuit dispensationalism and a biblical dispensationalism. And so there was different things that they said in there, but I critique it. I have two broadcasts on it. If you're interested, I can get them to you. Okay. And there's no way that Luther could ever have written that. And at the end, Lenker's work, Luther talks about that the Jews are going to be restored.
Yeah.
And at the end, he says, and would to God it be soon. Now, that's not a Luther that's writing on the Jews and their lives, wanting the restoration of Israel. He quotes the prophecies of Micah and a few other places.
All the prophecies are clear. Even if you go back to the Valdrois and the Waldensians, they all, which there was very little, that you can get from that. But even then, in the early church, like John Huss and John Wycliffe, they were all basically repeating what the Scripture says, that God had only partially separated. It goes back to the parable of the olive branches being broken off, and the unnatural wild olive branches being grafted in. But ultimately, if those wild olive branches, if they curse the tree, if they kick up against the tree, that they can be grafted back out again, and those natural branches can be easily grafted right back in.
That's right. Romans 11.
Yeah,
and so
clear.
What does it say? That fullness of the Gentile, there's blindness in part, because not all Jews are lost. There's some Jews that are saved. Yeah. Blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And then shall all Israel be saved.
Yeah, he said, do not boast against the branches, because you are not the root. Right. Israel is the root. Right. You're just the branch. You can be removed again. Yeah,
the root is Abraham.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's right. Father of the nation. That's right.
Don't boast against the branches, because and I think that's what they're doing now. You have these Joel Weebens, you have these preterists, and now they think they have the gospel. They think they have Jesus in their back pocket, and now they can kick dirt on the Jews, and it's just not the way it's going to work out for them.
No, it's not going to work. Preterism is such an abomination. I can't see how anybody could ever believe that, but they do. And the church, they
got to be Jesuit agitators, coadjutors. They got to be. They're too smart. They're too educated not to know the difference.
Yeah, Jesuit came out with preterism. So until these people realize the Jesuit connection here, what they wanted to do, they'll never get it. And also, the book of Revelation is closed. If you're a preterist, Revelation means no sense.
It ended. It ended in 70 AD. Yeah, that's completely insane.
So what's Revelation about? Is that just Candyland? We're just supposed to read?
And they love it. No, they love that because it puts the Bible back on the shelf and it just gives you Romanism. Roman religion.
Romanism, and you have no idea where anything's going.
Right.
Nothing. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, apparently they're not expecting Jesus to return at all because there's Jesus, he's the vicar of Christ in Rome. There he is. That's the whole trick of it.
He's not coming back because the vicar of Christ is going to take his place.
Yeah.
He's in the place of Christ until the final beast comes. And that's the Christ of Romanism, the beast. That's the Christ of Islam. That's the Mahdi.
The Muslims will accept it. Yeah, they'll take this. They'll take him as the final incarnation of Islam for them.
That's right.
So, yeah, the Jesuits are masterminds. When I look at their seal, I realize it's ancient Babylonian sorcery that they have been on top of this. They're that cult of Gnosticism, that underlying anti-Christian system of mystery religion and fraternity that was, what was that cult there? The cult of Mithras, right? And all these other, they would combine together. They would, as far as syncretism, they would syncretize and they would join all these systems of Isis worship and all the different cults of Rome into one system, and they took power. And that's really what Constantine inherited. That's what Constantine legalized right there, was that Gnosticism.
Right. Constantine was the devil's servant because when the devil couldn't destroy the church with the 10 great persecutions, he joined it with Constantine.
Yep.
And then that started some real damage. Now you had to have the separation and so on. But
yeah, those priests, that priestcraft of Rome was very active, and they took over the bishopric and the whole hierarchy of Rome. They took it over at that time that Constantine legalized it. Mm-hmm. And so it's been that counterfeit Christianity the whole time. They're well aware that they have totally subverted that system, and that underneath it's that ancient system of Jupiter worship and Ashtaroth paganism the whole time.
Yep. Total paganism, that's right. And that's when the Church of Rome started to go underground. And by the end, I believe, of the 4th century, there aren't any Christians in Rome because of what Constantine pulled.
Mm-hmm. Or if they were lukewarm, watered down pagan Christians, or Roman Christians, right?
And so the Jews call them what they are. They're Romans.
Yeah, and they were not happy. The Bishop of Rome was not happy just to let that situate like that. He had to reach out and start to take authority over Corinth and over every other church that he could.
And the other bishops call him Antichrist because there's no such thing as the chief bishop of Rome.
A chief emperor of the church.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Okay. The bishop of bishops.
Yeah, that was the work of Satan right there. That was the work of those Gnostic, that priestcraft. That was their agenda the whole time, was to create absolute imperial power, because that's what the priest kings of Babylon. That's what they were all about. There could only be one. Right. There could only be one Pontifex Maximus, and everyone else had to serve. It didn't matter what they called it.
That's exactly centralization of power in the state and the church united in one man. That's what they're about.
Amen. Well, thank you, Pastor Eric, for spending some time with us. I appreciate these books that you gave us. We're going to look them up and add them to our list. Okay. And thank you again. I hope all of our listeners will go to VaticanAssassins.org and take a look, and also 24/7 World Radio, and you can see Pastor Phelps preaching and his messages there that he likes to put out. And thank you, Pastor Eric, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, well, Lord bless Sean, and Lord bless your listeners.
Yep. Bless you. Have a great night.
Okay. You too.
Bye-bye.